Andrew Callahan, great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Oh, there we go. So sorry about that. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Off to a good start here. So we both watched instantly, with great interest, the Hunter Biden interview. And so my first question for you after watching all of that is, do you think that you are the new Joe Rogan of the left, or do you think Hunter Biden may be the new Joe Rogan of the left?
I don't know. I don't know when this like Joe Rogan of the left thing started happening, but you notice people just like talk about it all the time. There's like an insistence that there has to be a progressive podcaster like Joe Rogan to like win the next election. I don't know, but the Atlantic said that I'm Joe Rogan's child or something like that. They were like, a child of Joe Rogan because I gave him like. I mean, I don't know. I thought Hunter was pretty likable, but apparently most media outlets had a problem with his foul language. I think Kellyanne Conway said he's a potty mouth punk.
Oh, I was deeply offended by the swearing.
It's
that
fun.
was my major takeaway.
That's sort of like the inverse of what happened with Rogan, where like liberal media wouldn't like how uncouth Rogan's guests were back in the day, and now that's the same thing, just in reverse. That like now it's like conservative media clutching their pearls over Hunter Biden's language, but anybody who watches the whole thing is like, damn, this guy's like different than what I expected. This guy's kind of cool.
Yeah, he had a totally different. I mean, I had definitely a completely different impression of him before meeting him. You know, after I couldn't really believe it. He was super chill. But what's interesting is like I remember whenever we did the interview, Hunter told me he's like, no matter what I say, like if we talk for this long, both sides of the media are gonna like nitpick specific sound bites to make me sound as unhinged as possible. And I was like, what do you mean unhinged? She was like, they think I'm crazy. And it was actually crazy to watch because it was probably like my biggest interview drop. But within an hour of its release, you had like Ted Cruz, Nayib Bukele, Bill O'Reilly, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, all like moving in lockstep, furious about his language. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
They had an F-word counter where they had like an earthquake simulator that was like, here was what America would look like if the earthquake that hit America was as strong as how many F-words Hunter Biden said every minute. There was like a simulated like cityscape collapsing.
And it's like they all support Donald Trump, who's like part of his appeal is that he'll say anything and he's foul-mouthed, and like it's amazing to me the way that they just flip the standards like that, like it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, you know, I've seen some of these like Democratic politicians who are trying to be more relatable. They're now starting to like, you know, sort of intentionally curse. But with Hunter, you can tell this is very authentic to him. So, I mean, dig a little bit more into what you just said about how your impression of him beforehand was very different than, you know, how he came across to you in the interview. Like, what was your impression going in, and then how did it shift over the course of the interview?
Well, I just thought he was like an insane, unhinged, like, you know, deeply connected to Chinese and Ukrainian oligarchs, like open crack user. You know, so I was just imagining that he lived this like insane, one-of-a-kind lifestyle. But no, he was just a normal person. And I feel like part of the image they portrayed of him, because you have like it's what I see as like the Democratic establishment media sees him as like the ne'er-do-well, like kind of black sheep son of a real, you know, kind of like Scranton bulwark type of major Democrat figure, and who, you know, they feel like Hunter's legacy would cast a dark shadow on his father. Whereas on the conservative side, it seems like it's more just about the fact that he uses drugs and, you know, the fact that he was involved in like some international business dealings. But I just didn't know that he was so open to talking about whatever. Like a lot of people speculated that the interview, like we had pre-rehearsed talking points or like I needed final approval to put it out. No, he told me before the interview started, he's like, you can ask me about anything you want. And that kind of transparency is not something I expected from somebody who had, you know, just been subpoenaed by Congress and had to deliver testimony to, like, you know, serious judges.
That's kind of crazy that anyone thought that anyone who watched the interview
it was so
thought it was like officially approved.
Yeah,
because,
that's crazy.
Yeah, you get the total opposite.
Yeah, I got the opposite impression. It honestly seemed like you and Hunter have known each other for a while and that you guys were friends. How long have you known him?
I only knew him for like a week and a half before that. A lot of people wonder how we got connected. So I have this like attorney that helps me write release forms, like, and just helps me get material agreements when I'm doing interviews to like make sure paperwork's straight. And then I was just talking to him one day, and he was like, "Hey, how would you like to talk to Hunter Biden?" And I was like, "You know that Hunter Biden hasn't talked to anybody since 2020." And he was like, "Yeah, but you know, he watched Dear Kelly, he watches your stuff. Like, he thinks that he wants to talk to you." And I couldn't believe it. And then I had like an hour-long Zoom call with Hunter Biden. So I guess we did kind of get to know each other a little bit on Zoom for an hour beforehand. But no, I mean, I also think that, you know, I flew all the way out to Delaware to interview Hunter just, you know, so I feel like that was a gesture of good faith that kind of put us in good spirits.
Yeah, well, you could tell it was clear he was a fan of your work, like, and was familiar with your style and knew it. So I sort of guessed that he might have been the one that was the mover, you know, that came to you versus you coming to him. And so that's basically how it happened. He reached out via the lawyer that you knew.
Yeah, the lawyer just kind of came up with the idea, and yeah, so pretty much he was an intermediary between me and Hunter. But now me and Hunter talk all the time, and I've talked to him since the interview came out, and I thought that he was going to be shook by some of the headlines and like some of his, I guess tirades about George Clooney and immigration being taken out of context. But he told me, he said, all my friends think I did a great job. I'm happy with it. You know, all the media response has been predictable. But he did say that some Democrat insiders, like in the party, are very upset about his interview.
Yeah, the ones who are super scripted and super inauthentic, like Hakeem Jeffries is probably like, I don't like that, you know, or Chuck Schumer.
Or the ones he directly went after, like the Pod Save Bros are at war with him now. Rahm Emanuel took a lot of heat. Anita Dunn, others. So, you know, I'm sure he's feeling heat over that. And that's what makes me curious about how his dad might have felt about it if he even watched it.
Yeah, he's battling cancer. I mean, I don't know if he's focused on that.
I don't know if his dad had time to watch it. I'm really not sure. But I do think it's interesting how like CNN covered the interview because their headline is, should we be listening to Hunter Biden? And other ones said like, Hunter Biden needs to shut up.
Let me ask you this. How do you think he's doing now? Because first of all, the part on addiction was like, that was incredible.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
I mean, you had Rogan watched it on his show and was like, he makes me want to try crack the way he describes it. Like he describes it so phenomenally well. It's like listening to Tiger Woods talk about his golf swing or Jordan talk about his jump shot or something. You're like, this is rare form we're witnessing here. But what's your sense of how he's doing now? Because honestly, watching the interview, I kind of went back and forth a little bit. Like, oh, I'm really happy that he's clean. But then I'm watching it going, is he clean? I'm not sure he's clean.
I think that he's definitely clean and sober, just by virtue of the amount of meetings that he goes to, like for Narcotics Anonymous and stuff. Like he's pretty involved with that fellowship. Additionally, he's been sober since before the laptop pictures leaked, which I think is the most interesting part. Like he had been 6 months sober before all the pictures came out. And so I think that challenge of like remaining sober while your entire life of addiction is being broadcast on every publication in the country, I feel like that made him double down on sobriety. That said, I do think that when you go through that hardcore long period of addiction, your brain is like a little bit fried. Like you have certain receptors that have just been like whittled down. So I'm assuming that when you see him go into, you know, small flurries of rage or just sort of dissociative trains of thought, that could be just inherited behavior from his dad. But it also could be a little bit of like residual effects of hardcore crack use. Because he was smoking crack every 20 minutes for like 4 years.
Jesus Christ.
Well, do you think that, so when you say he's clean, I'm curious your read on that, because I know that like a lot of alcoholics, for example, they'll switch that out and they'll become like caffeine addicts and they drink caffeine all the time. It's a very common thing to go from like one thing to something that's less harmful but do it just as much. Is your sense on Hunter that like he cut all that shit out? Like there's no cigarettes, there's no coffee, there's no nothing?
He was vaping.
He was vaping, okay. Bro, I just quit.
Okay.
I just quit vaping, and let me tell you something. And I used to smoke too back in the day. I smoked for like, 6 years or something like that. Quitting cigarettes was easier for me than quitting vaping was this time around. You can ask Crystal. I've been struggling, dog.
And what is it about vaping that makes it harder to quit than cigarettes?
Well, so one of my theories is that when it comes to vaping, when it comes to smoking a cigarette, you have to like put aside a time and place to kind of do it, and you smoke the cigarette and then you're done smoking for like an hour or two or however long in between cigarettes. With a vape, you could be anywhere at any time and like sneak a hit on the vape. So basically it's like 24/7 you have this ability to just take a hit of something real quick, get that like nicotine rush, and like you just rely on it as like a crutch almost. It gives you like a little mental boost. It helps you focus a little bit, gives you a little bit of a head rush. And then to not have that, I feel like, and I was telling Crystal this, it just like almost like rewired my whole system, where the first like 3 or 4 days, I felt like I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't look at food. I didn't want anything to do with food. Then after the first 3 or 4 days, now I can't stop fucking eating. Anytime, 24/7. I'm starving now, and I want to keep eating until I'm like 500 pounds.
Well, and he cut out caffeine at the same time.
I did, yeah.
Both of them at once. So
you still cut out caffeine to this day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, let's be clear. This was, I want to say 12 or 13 days ago. I quit all of it. But the reason I did though is because I basically like caffeined and nicotined myself into a panic attack, which I've never had in my whole fucking life. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'll do anything to not have that happen again. And I think it was because of the nicotine and the caffeine, because I didn't eat anything, and I had hit the vape a bunch of times, and I had a little extra caffeine than I normally would, and I just went into total fucking, it was a scary experience. Anybody who deals with panic attacks, man, you have my love and you have my blessings. I had one in my life, 37 years on this earth, and I never want to experience that shit again. So that helped me quit it, and I stopped cold turkey right in that moment. I was like, I'm done with all this shit, done with it. And, that's the only thing that could have made me stop that fast. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure Hunter probably had a similar experience with his crack, which is obviously a way worse addiction, where he got himself into some weird position where it's like, what am I doing in Chinatown, butt-ass naked, laying on the ground at 4 a.m., getting robbed? At some point, you're going to be like, okay, I'm done, I'm out, I'm tapping out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, one story he told is that he was, laying face down in a bathtub at a motel in California, pretty much left for dead. He was going to die. And he said that an unknown drug user, he still doesn't know who they are, basically pulled him out of there when he was half dead and nursed him back to health for 6 hours. And that was one of the turning points of his sobriety. Because, you just get in these dark spots. Also, dude, I wanted to say, I watched the video that you made about the Nelk Boys Netanyahu interview a couple days ago.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about that.
And dude, you nailed the analysis, man. It's funny because everyone looks at this new media environment it's the saving grace. You see a lot of this discourse oh, fuck mainstream media, or as if new media and long form podcasting is going to come save the day and let dinosaur media rest and be replaced by this new guard of podcasters. And I think the Full Send Netanyahu interview is a classic example of why institutional guardrails of journalism can be helpful to some degree. And how it's just kind of crazy to think nobody remotely connected to the Fourth Estate in any way would have someone like Netanyahu on their platform and be like, yo, do you fuck with the new Burger King menu? And it was just so nuts. I'm not even gonna, there's people starving in Gaza now because of that guy. And he's and they're letting him get away with shit where he's Hamas is stealing the aid. Have you guys looked into how Netanyahu is funding different gangs inside of Israel?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That there's so many interesting questions that could have been asked, and that was a classic example of it was cool to see some of the pushback at the same time though. It's not like the consumers of new media are stupid.
It did not go well for them.
No,
but
their
you're
audience
so right.
revolted.
I think they just saw him in the same bucket as any other
edgy,
oh, this is interviewing Andrew Tate or interviewing Nick Fuentes, and they just I don't know, they're so content brained that they just saw it through the prism of
they're this fool's got haters. I'm gonna talk to him.
Exactly. I think they really saw it that way. And they go into the interview before they start the interview, they're like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. We don't know what we're doing here. And it's
I guess we're kind of journalists, bro.
Yeah.
We're journalists, bro.
And then they also admitted they were given a list of questions. It was set up through the White House. They were given a list of questions from the Israelis of here's what you should ask them. And it's just, I think it was actually important because it did present the logical endpoint of that analysis that you were saying of oh, you can just sit down, and shoot the shit with whoever, and that this is better than having some sort of someone who knows something about something and feels some sort of journalistic responsibility to actually, know facts and press the person for something other than just the most surface level propaganda.
Crystal and I were joking about this before the podcast, and we were like, this week's podcast guest, y'all, we got Jeffrey Epstein with us. Yeah.
We've got literal Satan here. Next week we're gonna have the other side of the story. We're gonna have someone on the other side of the story. Yeah.
No big deal.
But how do you think about that stuff? How do you prepare for your interviews, and how do you Hunter Biden is nowhere even in the category.
He's the perfect balance of controversial, but also everybody wants to hear from him.
Yeah, and he's not literally doing a genocide right now. Also, so it's a totally different ballpark. But
that's why Monday was such a crazy day, because the Full Send Netanyahu interview dropped the same hour as my Hunter Biden. These are two interviews that are so sought after by the traditional press they weren't able to get it. But the responses were obviously very different. And the way I prepared for it was I wanted Hunter Biden to be able to speak his mind and tell his side of the story. And I knew that giving a huge amount of significant pushback about his, Ukrainian business connections or whatever would make him so defensive that he wasn't willing to actually speak his mind. He wouldn't have got to that, fuck George Clooney state. You know what I mean? If I was continuously being so did your dad get you those jobs at UNICEF? You know, did you earn those things? Like, I'm not interested in making character judgments about whether or not he deserved jobs that he got throughout the years. I mean, everybody knows that rich and powerful people get jobs for their kids. I don't understand how that's even. I mean, sure, probably jobs should go to more qualified people in general, but that's just how the world is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
Well, I was going to say, I loved when he compared basically his corruption to that of Kushner and the younger
Trump
Trumps.
Jr..
Because I was like, damn, it is impossible to disagree with him. He's like, I'm over here making paintings, bro. I got paintings. Jared Kushner just took $2 billion from the Saudis. What are we talking about? And that really was like an eye-opening moment to me where it's like, yeah, you could, like, yeah, of course there's stuff to criticize there, and we have criticized the stuff there with the Ukrainian gas stuff and whatever. But when you compare that to, like, they got a Trump crypto exchange, they got Trump phones, they got Trump watches that are $100,000 a piece, they got, like, foreign billionaires going to Mar-a-Lago to give Trump money personally so that he can do their bidding through like, we've never seen this degree of corruption, and it almost is a disservice to even try to pretend like Hunter and them are on the same plane.
Paintings are remotely approaching that.
Yeah, and he made that case, I think, better than anybody I've seen in Democratic politics, where he felt it in his core, like, no, this is bullshit. I'm just making paintings. He said when he had his first art gallery thing, the paintings weren't even for sale. He said it wasn't even for sale. So you look at that, and he's thinking I'm bending over backwards to make it look like I'm not corrupt. And meanwhile, Jared Kushner's taking $2 billion from MBS, and it's just bullshit the way the media covers it, like it's the same, basically, or that Hunter is worse.
Yeah, I didn't want to be a part of that ecosystem and just lean into him more about, like, yo, so, you know, were you laundering money with the Saudis for your paintings? You know, what was really going on behind the scenes? And he gave me a painting, which was cool, and I didn't even pay for it. So I was like, all right, is this some kind of laundering? I'm not sure.
I'm going to buy. I want to buy Hunter paintings. Let's do that.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was definitely the biggest interview of my career. So I was also, like, transparently a little bit nervous, you know, because I'm like, I don't want to say something that's going to make him shut this interview down. Thanks, because it's like, you know how this guy's obviously never given an interview before, so instead of, you know, I'm sure he's used to all these aggressive lines of questioning. You know, he got questioned by Congress less than a year ago, or around a year ago, something like that. So I don't know. It was definitely an exciting experience, but the craziest part was watching the rollout.
The reaction to it.
Yeah, because by default, every single major publication had to cover it by virtue of its importance. And I had never made something that required and demanded that level of coverage. So it was just interesting to, like, watch that prism from, like, left to right and center, how people were fitting the interview to serve their own agenda, because we talked for so long that it was like you could basically pick a soundbite somewhere in there to serve whatever Hunter agenda that you're trying to push.
Yeah, that's true. It's also freaky because he sounds and looks so much like a young version of his dad.
Yeah, the cadence.
You know, I mean, that's the other thing that's really, and obviously a very sharp guy. I mean, it is amazing, like, how much he fried his brain with drugs. He's still obviously very, very sharp and intelligent person. One part that I found really, like, sort of absurd is in the fuck George Clooney and Rahm Emanuel and the Pod Save Bros and whatever in that screed, it's funny to me that his dad, who obviously, you know, was a senator for all these decades and vice president of the United States for 8 years, and then, you know, the Democratic establishment really rallies behind him to screw over Bernie and make sure he's the nominee in 2020, including Barack Obama being involved behind the scenes to try to make sure that happens. And Hunter positions himself and his dad like they're the outsiders being screwed over by these elite Democrats. And that part actually, to me, it was very Trumpian in a way, because Trump also does this thing of, like, screw the mainstream media and screw the elites and the, you know, trying to position himself as the outsider. And meanwhile, you're like, you were president of the United States. You're a literal billionaire. You staffed your cabinet with billionaires. You have this entire media ecosystem that's devoted to, like, glazing you 24/7. And so to me, there were some, like, sort of Trumpian echoes in that moment of how he was framing himself and his family, who are the ultimate political insiders, as being victims of political elites.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, I definitely should have brought up the 2016 primaries with Bernie, because that was the first time I voted, and it was like, yeah, they definitely did disenfranchise him. I guess I just thought of that as more being like a Hillary Clinton type of thing, but I suppose that there was.
No, I'm talking about in 2020. I'm talking about.
Yeah, she's talking about when Yeah,
Yeah.
when basically Bernie won like the first 3 contests, and then you had like Pete Buttigieg dropped out, Amy Klobuchar dropped out, they all dropped out, and Obama allegedly made a phone call to get them to all drop out and endorse Biden, and that got him across the finish line. But I think like the interesting thing to your point, Crystal, is what that shows is there are different factions within the elites, right? Like it's not just there's the Democratic elite. It's like there's an Obama wing, there's a Biden wing, there was like a Pelosi wing, and things are always in flux. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he clearly despises everyone in the Obama wing. That
Yeah,
part really came out.
Everybody who he feels like stabbed his dad in the back, he hates.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, as a son, I sort of get that. But he also is oblivious to the fact that, like, it wasn't just Nancy Pelosi who thought his dad was too old to run after that debate. The whole country, even before the debate, had effectively decided, like, you're really not up to this. And he was on his way to, obviously, Kamala ends up losing as well. But he was on his way to, like, a record-breaking, disastrous landslide type of defeat. And, you know, that part is very much left out by Hunter of what the actual political realities were outside of George Clooney and Nancy Pelosi and the Pod Save Bros or whoever.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was definitely an interesting thing to sort of be able to dissect and take a microscope to like the individual factions within the Democratic Party. And on one hand, you can kind of admire Hunter for just having that loyalty for his dad. You know, like if I had a son, I hope that he would defend me tooth and nail to the very end. But you know, it wasn't just like a Obama Pelosi wing psyop to say that President Biden appeared to be unqualified to run. Like people had reached that decision collectively far before George Clooney did his New York Times op-ed. Like that had been chatter amongst the general public for such an extended period of time, and not just in conservative reactionary media. Like that's what people were saying. You know, but I can see from Hunter's vantage point when he's, you know, he's probably around a lot of sort of yes men inside of the Biden wing who are also kind of like pumping optimism into that environment.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden he sees like his bubble's kind of broken by other Democrats. But that bubble was being broken by like the greater, almost apolitical side of the country too, who like doesn't vote, but just like consumes memes and, you know, just isn't necessarily involved. Like I had been hearing that Joe Biden had like dementia or whatever in the meme sphere for almost the entire presidency.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I always feel like that last minute capitulation from people like Clooney, I'm not sure if that was even necessarily like a conscious, like Pod Save America bros mixed with Obama conspiracy. I think it might have just been a logical conclusion that many people came to. Because, I mean, we had seen, and not only that, but there wasn't an extended sit down with Joe Biden outside of a controlled environment. You know what I mean? There wasn't that sort of like, and I know a lot of people credit the podcast sphere for getting Trump elected, and I think there is something to that because there wasn't, you didn't see anybody just sitting down shooting the shit with Biden for more than, you know, 5 or 10 minutes really. You saw State of the Union, but like he didn't have that relatability factor, which made people feel like maybe there was something happening behind the scenes. Hunter says that there wasn't. But then again, like he just loves his dad so much. That's probably the one element of the interview that I would say is not necessarily objective.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, he clearly loves his dad.
Even in that, though, Hunter said, well, he aged in front of our eyes. You know, I mean, even Hunter acknowledged how much aging had occurred during the presidency. Now, his position is that didn't keep him from doing his job, and he did, you know, was able to get these bipartisan deals done, and he was so effective, blah, blah, blah. But even he has to acknowledge that, you know, he aged in front of our eyes and he's, you know, 81-year-old man or whatever, however old he is or was, and that weighed on the public impression. I mean, the other piece of this is that the same set of quote unquote Democratic elites, you know, the Nancy Pelosi's and of the world, who ultimately come in and are pushing him out of the race and sort of like stopping the money from flowing into the campaign. I think that probably is really the thing that killed Biden and really pushed him out. Those are the same people who had circled the wagons to make sure there was no Democratic primary and there was, you know, no ability of a Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or whoever might have challenged him to actually get in and for voters to have a chance to assess for themselves whether or not he was up to the task this time around.
I think because if there was a floor fight in an open primary, nobody in their right mind would have picked an establishment Democrat candidate.
Yeah.
Right. Especially now. I feel like that's where we're at.
Yeah.
But do you get the sense that he's in denial about like the state of his father's health? Because I can speak from personal experience. My dad died in 2011 from cancer. He had lung cancer and metastasized to his spine, and then he died relatively quickly. And I remember thinking, like, you know, and I'm in my 20s at the time, but I'm thinking like, yeah, it's bad, but I don't know, I've seen him bounce back from worse. You know, I've seen him laid up in bed because he had some fucking impacted tooth and it was pressing on the nerve and he can't move for a week and then he was fine after it. And it's like, you think like, yeah, my dad will kind of get through it. I get that sense a little bit from Hunter that he feels like, yeah, my dad's struggling, but like he'll be all right. But in reality, it's like, homie, I don't think you know how bad this really is. Hey guys, we had a great conversation with Andrew Callahan of Channel 5. He just did an amazing interview with Hunter Biden that was over 3 hours long. Definitely go check out the whole thing. But if you want to know the entire background story and what it was like and how we met Hunter and what he thinks about the whole thing, subscribe below on Substack. You'll get our full talk with Andrew and you don't want to miss it.